Hello, retro game investors, collectors, speculators. You are all here today, hopefully, for this video. I'm excited to make this one. I think this is an important topic that we're going to kind of talk about, just digging into each of these kind of tag names, I guess, for different people within the hobby, and just different things that I've learned along the way in collectibles. If you're new here, please hit that subscribe button, karate chop the notification bell, as my son and daughter like to say. And you know what? That's how you know that you're going to be notified every time that I have a video coming out. It's just worthwhile, guys. And a like if you like what you hear. We're trying to grow the channel. This is a new channel for me. I'm excited about it. So let's go ahead and dig right into it. Okay, guys, the dreaded word investor has cropped up in the collectible space over the last few years, and I joke about it being a dreaded word, but it's just interesting because you have a lot of collectors of certain things, whether it be video games or comic books or sports cards or whatever that collectible happens to be, toy trains, whatever it is. And then when you have investors come into those markets, a lot of times the collectors get upset because they're used to buying these items at certain price points, or if there's just more collectors coming into the market, the same sort of result can happen. And what we've seen in collectibles as a whole is you have all of these things happening at the same time, really. You have investors coming in with big money, you've got collectors coming in, new collectors, as well as just speculators. So, what are the differences between the two? I think that these are things that can kind of all be intertwined. I consider myself to be a hybrid of these things. So I consider myself to be a collector of retro video games. I'm also somewhat an investor, and then I'm also a speculator because, let's face it, graded video games, retro video games, or loose raw, collecting those and price points moving up on these particular items is a fairly new thing. So I am speculating on this particular market. And a lot of people are speculating. If you've been watching the news, you're seeing, there is some huge money coming into this particular market. There's a graded Mario 64 9.8 game in WATA 9.8 that sold for over $1.5 million. That's not a collector in my mind, strictly a collector. It could be. I would have to assume, though, that it's some sort of hybrid between investor, collector, speculator. That is a person that is someone that, and look, maybe it's a billionaire that bought it and is just collecting it and doesn't care whatsoever if it goes to zero in price point. I just have a hard time believing that. And I think that if a lot of collectors are honest about themselves, they at least care about the value of their collection. For me personally, like I said, I'm all three of these things. I have a family. I've got mouths to feed, so to speak. And so for me personally, for my own specific situation, I am collecting games that I think have historical relevance because I think they're awesome. At the same time, I do care about them holding value and ideally gaining some value over time. That would be great. But I'm kind of looking at it from the whole piece of that pie because I have to make sure that while I would love to just have many different games in my collection and it just be kind of willy-nilly and if they were worth nothing, then that's okay. For me, I would like them at least to be able to kind of tread water, hold value. That would be ideal. It's fairly common to hear speculators being knocked for speculating, and I understand why. It's high risk to speculate on a new market or a market that hasn't even really kind of come about yet. You're trying to get in on something that might be early for you if you're collector, investor, speculator. It is common to hear that that's a dumb idea because a lot of these things never come to fruition. You might be speculating on a certain type of collectible that never really kind of takes off, or it's something that doesn't take off the way that you think that it might. And so it's easy to kind of knock speculators because it is high risk. And frankly, if you don't have any sort of kind of financial foundation in place, then it might not be the best way to go. For me personally, I'm not necessarily speculating without already having, other types of things in place, whether it be, owning a home, having a retirement plan, etc. Though you don't want it to necessarily take away from necessities and essentials and kind of those traditional foundational financial pieces. For me, I do have, some extra disposable income. And so that's a way for me to be able to move into and speculate on a fun new collectible market. Now, it doesn't always work out to where people are wrong. If you were holding on to 50s baseball cards and you still had them today, you'd be in pretty good shape. I mean, these are the collectors, these collections that are now being sold at, multi-millions of dollars in the sports card world, where they were essentially kind of collecting and speculating on these particular items, and they just worked out. It worked out for those families, and for those collectors. A lot of people are speculating on cryptocurrencies, digital assets. A lot of people are speculating on NFTs. That is kind of one of the new hot words, one of the new kind of collectibles, the digital collectibles. Are NFTs the future? Is that going to be what we're collecting? We just don't know. In the same vein, could graded video games be in the same realm as graded baseball cards, graded sports cards, graded comic books? You've got coins and currency and other collectibles. Could this space be considered in the same as those? And we just don't know yet. And there's also a distinction between vintage video games and modern video games. Speculating on modern versus vintage, there's nuances with all of this stuff. It's not a broad brush, it's not a general statement. It is literally very nuanced, all of it. And it's all kind of changing and growing. It's a living organism that is evolving, before our eyes. So, investor, speculator, collector, whatever it is that however you hobby, so to speak, everybody has a place and everybody has a role to play. And I think that there's room for everybody in the market. I think it's kind of important, to have kind of a combination of these folks. Now, there might be some, downsides to it, but I'm an optimist, and I think that there is more upside to having a combination of these three than there is not having, one or the other. I think that is very important. How are you guys operating in this space? Are you just strictly a collector? Do you think of yourself as a collector? Are you an investor? Are you a speculator? Or are you a combination of the three? I personally think that the vast majority of people are a combination of the three. They might not necessarily fess up to it. They might not, but I think that they are to some degree. And again, I'm speculating on that. But anyway, however you look at it, this is a really fun new market that has come about. Video games, the nostalgia that comes with it, and also the historical significance of the brands. If you're looking at just, let's just look at Nintendo as one example. The Mario Brothers series or the Zelda series. There's longevity to these now. Now, will people be buying the actual physical cartridges and the actual physical boxes 30 years down the line? We don't know that part. But Nintendo is a growing brand. It's not a brand. It's kind of in the same vein as Marvel. Is Marvel going anywhere anytime soon? No, it's not. Now, which collectibles are going to be worth money down the line? We have no idea. We don't know if it's going to be these graded video games, if it's going to be digital versions, is it going to be NFTs, is it going to be whatever? But that's part of the fun of the speculation of it. So if you enjoy speculation, then great. Some people just want to get it's kind of that excitement of, am I getting in on something early, and can I be a kind of a winner on getting into something early? And there's a fun element to that. I love the nostalgia. I love the historical relevance for me, and it's kind of cool for me to think that in my childhood was the beginning of video games as we know them. I was born in 81, so my childhood was really kind of growing up in that first wave of what was video games. I guess technically it's someone that's a little bit older than me. Back in the 70s is really kind of when you saw kind of late 70s, with the arcades really hitting it, and then the 80s arcades were huge. So I was really young in the 80s, but that was the beginning time of video games. So for me, it's kind of a fun nostalgic thing to own, to collect, because it's something from my childhood that also happens to be it turned out to be historically relevant as far as like I said with Nintendo, they've got Super Nintendo World that they're building in Orlando and in Japan. These are brands. These are long-lasting brands. Now look, could it all, maybe in 20 years, nobody cares about it and it's not relevant. It very well could be that way, but it's fun to think about what could be. And so that's part of the speculation part. So I think just being honest about, speculating on whether it be modern video games or vintage video games. We'll get into other videos. We'll talk about modern versus vintage and some of the things I've learned along the way in other collectibles markets. So stick with me, guys. Thank you for joining me. And then let me know in the comments, how do you consider yourself investor, collector, speculator, or a little bit of all of it? I'd like to hear from you all and learn from you all. Stay healthy, stay awesome. I'll see you next time.